Authors Press.
Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. And on the line with us today, we have Richard Grabmeier, accompanied by his wife, Mary Kay. And we're going to be discussing Richard's fantastic book, Peter Olaf. Guys, I will say that Richard was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Authors Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact our great friends over at Authors Press. You can find out more information on them at authorspress.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Richard and Mary, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you both for being guests. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. I've really been looking forward to talking to Benji.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Richard. Listen, the feeling is mutual, okay? I've absolutely been looking forward to this as well. Now, Richard, listen, I know we have so much information to cover. So without further ado, let's jump right in. First and foremost, Peter Olaf is a historical fiction. What is it based on?
Well, it's based on my grandfather's coming to this country at the age of 17 from Sweden. Can you imagine being all by yourself on a ship coming to a new world at the age of 17? I don't know how I could do it. But absolutely. A lot of people did, and he was one of them.
Fantastic. Now, is the story actually a history of him?
Well, the story is fiction. The history is real. You know, he came to this country having great ideas, and he went to work in the logging camps up north in Minnesota, taking down the big pine trees that built this country. And later on in his life, he went into business. It was a concrete business, actually, in Minneapolis. And from there, he went into a farm ranch out in North Dakota. And that's where my father met his daughter, Frances, who was my mother.
Fantastic.
It was, that world was completely different out there then, because my grandfather had to raise wheat. They raised wheat, and they had to have all kinds of help to harvest the wheat. We're getting a little ahead of the game here, but my father went out to work on a threshing rig. And in those days, they had to harvest the grain. They used a binder, it cut the grain off, and then they shocked it up into little stacks in the field. And then they took and built bigger stacks, and they finally had a thresh rig come around. It was a threshing machine that took the grain out of the straw, and it was pulled by usually a steam engine tractor or an old, as they call them, oil pull tractor. And that's what my father ran when he was out there.
Wow, Richard, thank you so much for everything that you've shared so far. You know, I'm curious because I know your book is packed with so much information. Now, in your opinion, Richard, is the story that you've created one that would interest young people?
Well, actually, yes, it would if they're interested in history, if they're interested in knowing about something besides what we live in today. Because myself, I'm 85, and I have seen everything come into this world, from the old crank telephone we first had put on the wall when I was a little kid, until space flight. And so there's much to be learned there, and it's going to be completely different than what the world is today. And it's very interesting. The only word of caution about it, the book, is that on very young children, probably it's a little out of line because there's a lot of romance in it.
Richard, Suddenly a Larger World is considered by many to be a sequel to Peter Olaf. Why is that?
Well, it's because when I wrote Peter Olaf, I had a following that really liked the book. One of them was an English teacher by the name of Betty, and she was my number one fan, and she wanted to follow up on Peter Olaf and his family, and there wasn't anything, and there were a lot of other people that had said the same thing. So I eventually started writing the sequel. Unfortunately, Betty passed away before it was finished, unexpectedly. But the sequel is a following of Peter's family. And so why it's called a sequel? Because it's based on the same characters that the original Peter Olaf was based on, and a lot of the different occasions that Peter Olaf was based on. And so to understand the sequel, you really need to read Peter Olaf first. But it's not a warmed over book where same old people doing the same old thing, because this takes place, the sequel, Suddenly a Larger World, takes place in the First World War, and 3 of Peter's sons are in the World War, and one of them turns out to be a fighter pilot for the British Fighters Air Force, and one of them becomes a tank driver, and one of them is an infantryman, and they have far different experiences, but they're all war experiences. So it's really an interesting book for people that like adventure.
Again, here on the line with Richard Grabmeier. We're discussing his fantastic book, Peter Olaf. Richard, next question that I'd love to go into, and you've already started to go into it slightly. Richard, are Peter and Sarah sitting in their resort worrying about their sons?
Well, they actually would be, wouldn't they? But actually, it didn't quite work out that way. And in many cases in the real world, it didn't, because the government put together an outfit called the Twin-Head Engineer Regiment. And this was a group of sawmen, men who knew how to run sawmills. And they put them together and shipped them into France to saw lumber for the much-needed Allied war effort. And so Peter, of course, couldn't stand being away from his son, so he went to France to saw lumber. And they all met there, of course. And it's not a stretch of the imagination, because it actually happened. They put together this regiment, was strictly a bunch of sawmen running sawmills for the war effort.
What would you say was a highlight for you in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon this journey?
Well, what is really different about this book is it doesn't end with the war effort. It goes into a situation where the youngest or the oldest son of the three, who was the pilot, was a grandson of a Frenchman, and the Frenchman died someplace in the Mississippi headwaters, but the son or the grandson wanted to find his relatives in France while he was in France. So they hunt for the relatives of Christian, and they do find them, and it's because they raised a particular breed of cattle that were not hardly known in the United States, but who Christian's grandfather was very proud of. It was the Charlet, and they did find Christian's relatives, and from there on it just goes into the afterlives of these people after the war, and there's still a lot of adventure.
I love having this platform. You know, I'm an artist myself, and we've, of course, discussed this in previous calls, but being an artist myself, Richard, I'd love having this platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in. Now, in this instance, other writers out there listening in. Now, Richard, you are an accomplished author. You've written multiple books, and you've gotten multiple books published. So you're someone that has been through the gauntlet of the process of getting your book out there. So I'd love to take this opportunity, Richard. Any words of wisdom, any words of advice you can give a new writer, someone out there just starting out? What would you like to tell them?
Well, I'd like to tell them, first of all, know what you're writing about and believe in it. You have to believe in what you're writing, or it's going to come up false to the readers. Readers will catch that real quick. And the second thing is, writing is only part of putting the books into the public. Publishing is the hard part, publishing and promoting. And in promotion, you have to go through things like we're doing right now. We've got to talk to people. And I don't know, writers, it probably goes against their grain to be promoters. They want to tell a story, but they don't necessarily have the business sense to bring it out to the people. That's going to be the hard part. And you have to have a good outfit. I've got a good outfit working with me right now in Writers Press.
There you have it. You know, just going back to that very first thing that you said, I mean, everything that you said was magnificent and so powerful. But really going back to that very first thing that you said, guys, what great advice really for life in general. Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you're committing yourself to, make sure that your heart is in it. Whether that's your job, whether that's your career, whether that's your significant other, make sure that your heart is invested. When you actually care about what you're doing, then you truly start to receive the benefits of the work that you're putting forth. I absolutely love that advice. Fantastic. Listen, you guys know what you have to do, okay? I'm going to say it for you one more time, even though I know I don't have to, because you're already there. Just for those little last-minute stragglers in the back, one more time. Here on the line with Richard Grabmeier. We just finished discussing his wonderful book, Peter Olaf, primarily built and constructed for entertainment. But it also has that historical aspect as well, so there's going to be a fantastic education you'll receive as well. So make sure you're picking up your copy as soon as you can. And also, check back in frequently for any other books that Richard has written as well. Richard, this has been such a pleasure. Honestly, really just as great as the first interview. Thank you once again for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you very much. And I have to say you're a man of great patience who put up with people like me on an interview. And thank you for your patience.